Hello, and welcome to Rye Bakery and Frome. There's a lot of people here who I've never seen before in my life, which is very lovely. Brilliant to have such a huge turnout and to have a very different audience, which is brilliant. My name is Peter. I've been involved in Frome's local politics until about a month ago, and now I'm not. Which, in a sense, takes me back to part of where I've been for at least a decade, which is involved in climate activism of one kind or another. I got involved in politics because of wanting to up the whole status and involvement of environmentalists using Frome. And then I've stepped sideways to 17 other fine people who'll do it as well as I ever did, if not better. I need to do very little, really, because I'm really just going to introduce this event. I want to, as I say, welcome to Rye Bakery and to Frome, and to thank Amy, who's slipped quietly out of view. Amy's my daughter, who manages this place, and all you see before you. There'll be more tea and cake at 8 o'clock. And the other bits of business are that they're not expecting any fire drills. You just sort of rush out of there or rush out of here if there's a fire. The toilets are out of here, out through here. And if you use the toilets or if you're out there, can you try and be a bit quiet because there's a yoga class going on upstairs. And when we leave, if you happen to go out that way, also try and leave quietly. So I got involved in this because Jamie asked me if I could help find a venue. Because after New Internationalist published, have you got my thing? Thank you. The last edition, which was this one, of which there are copies up with Annabelle on the way in. How to avoid climate breakdown. They decided that they'd like to sort of take that out to the people as well as have it in print. And decided to do a tour, which was conceived about 10 days ago, something like that. So it's another thing to say that it's extraordinary that there are that many of you here in many ways, but it's also not extraordinary, because in a way, why are we having any other conversations at all? And so it's fantastic to see so many people, but I'm absolutely sure that this will continue to roll in the way that it is. Hazel and I talked about having somebody come to do, there's a poet in the room called Liv Talk, who's written a poem, which some of you will have seen her perform. It's about 5 minutes long, and it's incredibly moving. It's based on her, I think her daughter, I can't remember if it's the daughter or the son now, but asking a question about the future and her realising that she couldn't answer that. Liv can't make it, which is a pity, but the reason we wanted her was to try and embed this evening in heart as well as head. There's a kind of risk, I think, with this sort of event, that we can get lost in just the answers to the questions and miss out what's actually underlying all that, which is, where we are in terms of planetary breakdown and chaos. And I guess all I want to say in finishing really is to kind of invite you, where possible, to kind of go to there too, in terms of the questions that we have and the conversation that we have. So that we don't spend the next 2 hours talking about how many degrees or how many bits of parts per million bollocks, So that this is also something that really means something. So that's all that I'm going to say. I'm going to hand over to Yohann, who's going to facilitate this evening, and he will introduce everyone else. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Peter. Thanks for that introduction. And thanks, what an amazing turnout here. Thanks for coming to this, which is the second of our How to Avoid Climate Breakdown talks. First was last week in Oxford, and the last one was this Thursday in London. And thanks Peter and Amy for the warm welcome we've had here for this amazing space. If you're a tweeter, do tweet along with anything during the conversation we have tonight that you find interesting or you agree with or you disagree with. We've got a very original and catchy hashtag, NIClimateTalks. So do try and add a little hashtag so we can find them afterwards when you do. I'm going to try and multitask and tweet as well at the same time. So if I'm on my phone, I'm not absent-mindedly texting. I'm trying to do some of that as well. And so, yes, the conversation, as Peter outlined, is how to avoid climate breakdown. I was thinking on the way over here about this topic, climate change. I obviously remember learning about climate change as a topic at school. and it would have been in geography. This is the mid-2000s, and so it would be a geography class and you're learning about greenhouse gases, and carbon, and methane emissions, and the greenhouse effect. I remember a homework project where we'd have to sketch or do diagrams of different types of renewable energy, the forms that would power the new century, and it was all very instructive. You know, this would be in between learning about maths and then going on to learn about, you know, the reign of King Henry VIII or whatever. And you would just have this one geography lesson where we would learn, oh, by the way, we're destroying the planet. And now it's time for lunch. You know, and then double maths or whatever. And that sort of sense of double consciousness, that sense that we all know what's going on, and we also know that our ruling classes are doing very little about it, can be quite immobilizing, can be quite paralyzing, and lead to a sense of fatalism. And that's exactly why now, in this year, I think it's a really exciting time to be having these discussions, because as a lot of people will be aware, I feel like that consensus of cynicism and inertia and complacency is basically unstable, it's basically fractured because of Extinction Rebellion, which is of course a direct action in the social movement, which has come very quickly into everyone's attentions over the past year, and then the climate strikers, the school climate strikers, who at their peak managed to get 1.4 million, is it 1.4 million? 1.4 million school children not attending school on a single day. So we've gone from this sense of climate change being just another subject among many to, I think, a wider recognition that it is an existential question, one that undergirds all the other questions that we'd like to talk about. And so, I mean, a lot of this was sparked by the IPCC's report, which came out in October 2018. So that's the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which basically told us it's time to panic, but with more graphs and data, so they didn't use those exact words. But it told us that the warming is happening faster than we thought it was. And we're looking at hitting about 1.5 degrees within 12 years, at which point 90% of the coral reefs will be gone. There'll be more intense heat waves and floods and droughts. They'll start plaguing the planet much more regularly than they already are, particularly hitting the global south, which they already are at a much more highly intensified rate. And several hundred million might be facing food insecurity. Past 2 degrees, it gets worse. Past 2 degrees, it's almost apocalyptic. We're talking about cities and islands underwater and so on. Our current trajectory is for 3 degrees, by the way. But we're obviously not going to end the night there. We're all going to have feeling pretty depressed and immobilized. There are lots of strategic and political questions which are in dispute, which we'd like to kind of work towards answering tonight, so that we get something of a roadmap or a map out of this crisis. There are lots of questions that have been spoken about kind of in climate and eco-activism circles for decades and are finally becoming mainstream. Do we need to act locally? Do we need to act nationally or internationally, or all of the above? If you could only prioritise one, which should it be, given how much of the time we have? Should we be embracing a Green New Deal, which we're going to talk about more later what that means? Or does anything that centres economic growth and its heart basically, you know, mean that it's too little, too late, or we're contributing to a problem that already exists? What kind of tactics do we want to employ as we get there? Do we go through the courts? Should it be direct action? Should it be protest movements? Should it be all of the above? And there's also the interesting question of, are market forces on our side? Are renewables becoming so cheap that eventually there'll be sort of natural realignment within the system? I'm skeptical about that, but maybe, you know, others aren't. We can talk about it more later. And so in this very dense thicket of questions, we at New Internationalist tried to make a little intervention. I say we, it was mainly my colleague and co-editor Hazel Healy here, whose magazine Peter was just talking about. And it's also in that spirit that we engage in these talks. And we have a great panel here today to try and start our way towards provoking conversation and getting some answers towards some of those questions. We have Hazel. So Hazel's a co-editor at NI, we're a cooperative, which is why co often comes before our job titles. And Hazel specialises in stories that unpack the thorny subjects of justice, equality, political change. Her work's been published in the BBC World Service and The Guardian, and she currently edits NI's Climate Justice column and has stewarded various other of our issues on including efforts to deal with climate change in Bangladesh and the current issue on climate breakdown. To her left is Anna Francis. Anna, who some of you might know, is the Resilience Manager here at Frome Town Council and a Director of Frome Renewable Energy Co-op and Sustainable Frome. She's been an environmental activist for over 20 years, and at the Council she's spearheaded many pioneering projects such as the UK's first Library of Things and the first community fridge. She's coordinating plans and projects to help the town be carbon neutral, or zero carbon by 2030, which I'm definitely interested in hearing more about. And then finally we have Jamie, who's contributing editor in Internationalist, a teacher, a writer, a prolific media commentator, and a professional rabble-rouser. Is a core participant in many emerging grassroots movements, but recently has been a coordinator for several Extinction and Rebellion groups. So let's have a round of applause for our panel. So Jamie, let's start with you. By the way, I'll have some questions for the panel, and then we'll branch out to Q&A and discussion later. So Jamie, your recent organising experience has been with Extinction and Rebellion. What have the past 6 months of your life been like? And maybe for some people who don't know, what is Extinction and Rebellion? And how's it been going?
Hi, good evening everyone. Thanks so much for coming. It's a amazing turnout. It's wicked. Well, there's a couple of people in the rebellion here, right? So you know what the last 6 months have been like, which is really, really hard work and very, very full on and going very, very fast. But it's also about feeling that there is something that's burst that activist bubble. It's getting in the, I was on, when we did the International Rebellion in London recently, right, I was on Good Morning Britain in the morning, and obviously in the bloody morning, and I never even knew that TV show existed. I don't have a TV, right, so I was on it, and described as a organiser or coordinator or something. Anyway, I stay at my mum's when I go up there, so I got a cab from the station back to my mum in South London, and I started talking to the cabbie, like in a proper old black cab car, right? And I was going, what do you think about that? And invariably, cabbies absolutely hate protests, man, because it just really screws up their job, yeah. But I thought, I'll ask him anyway. I won't admit I've got anything to do with it at all. I just said, oh yeah, let's see that news thing, what do you think about that? It's the weirdest thing, I've never had this before. He was going, oh no, it's a pain in the arse completely for people in my profession, obviously. But they're absolutely right, I'm bloody terrified, and good on them. And it was really interesting having this conversation with him. And of course at the end, I went, oh, by the way, I'm with them. And he was going, good on you, son, then kept me in the car and gave me more of a chat about how we can really block roads. He was saying, I'm a cabbie, we can tell you. Anyway, it was just like, bloody hell, that's not normal at all. It's not normal at all. And it's all these not normal moments that make it worthwhile. But it is really, really hard work, because it got so big so quickly. And, there's 100,000 people who signed up to the action list in this country at the moment. And there's 59 countries that we're in. So everyone's, just today. Do you know that? How many people actually know about Extinction Rebellion and following it in the room? Quite a few. Checking it out, all right. So just today, you lot with your little hands up, you'll know, outside Holyrood, outside Scottish Parliament, they've got a 5-day camp because climate change is being debated in there, okay? But at the same time, in Melbourne, they're setting up a massive camp and planning on blockading the city because of Adani, same day. Same day, over in Spain, there's an action today. Over in Mexico, there's an action today, all right? So that's just today. I mean, I don't want to make any comparisons with Queen Bloody Victoria and the Empire, but the fact is that the sun does not set on Extinction Rebellion. There's actions happening wherever, all the time, right? Which is really exciting and frightening. And then the other side of it is this, and then I'll pass on to your next question, but the other side of it is this, what's it like? This is what it's like. I did some media for us. So if you're going to do media, we have a stream of the most recent information coming down, right? And that's the hard thing, right? Is to, you go, I did Nick Ferrari. If you know Nick Ferrari, LBC. I train people in media, and Nick Ferrari is like, he's the worst one, And I went, and Nick Ferrari was agreeing with us, which was weird. But in the preparation for it, you look at the science today, the news comes out, Bering Straits. That's the straits between the Atlantic and the Pacific, Bering Straits. They've flooded, they've had a winter flood. That's not meant to happen for 60 years. And then yesterday we had the report about the tundra melting, the permafrost, yeah? That's melting at a rate that's not meant to happen until 2090. And so, you know, I'll just leave you on this bit to start off with, which is grief. I've never been in a movement where grief is absolutely the heart of it. You know, usually we bond by, I don't know, doing an action and then going to the pub afterwards. This lot, we bond by sobbing our eyes out because of what we're facing. You're sobbing for what's gone and what will definitely go. There's no chance about this. And that's a very unusual way of bonding together. So, in short, I see this as a really good opportunity, but seriously hard work, and it's not something you switch on and off at all. Okay.
So I guess it's, do you think of Extinction Rebellion as a social movement? Is there a sense, have you given it a label or a sort of...
Yeah, I mean, I really like the way they use the word rebellion instead of activism and stuff like that. Yeah, it's definitely a social movement. I mean, we're in Frome. You know, the only chance that we're going to have is to have communities coming together and organising. It's the only chance we've got. Yeah, your food distribution networks are screwed within 3 or 4 years. You know, the life that we've lived is gone. It has to go. Okay, so it's actually a social movement in the sense that people are going to have to come together and deal with this. It's definitely not a political movement in the sense that there's no kind of hidden feelings that maybe the Labour will sort it out, or the Tories will sort it out, or Greens will even sort it out. It has to be us coming together. It's a new form of democracy, which is why we're trusting citizens' assemblies and sortition.
And so direct action has been the thing that I think has got Extinction Rebellion on the front pages and consciousness raising and that sort of. In terms of the future, do you think does XR, no, sort of, just for the purpose of this, sort of the unofficial XR sort of voice, but in terms of those tactics, do you think consciousness raising is the main thing we should do at the moment, or does XR plan on being more of a political act in a traditional sense? What kind of role do you see it playing in the future?
Yeah, it's not a political act in a traditional sense, but it's definitely political in the way that it's making people think about what the hell we're meant to be doing, how we're meant to live with each other, and how we're meant to live with the last of these resources, what responsibility we should really be taking. And I see the use of mass non-violent civil disobedience as central for good. I mean, we're coming back, you know, I don't know if the plans have come out yet, but Heathrow's going to be a very major target, and that's going to be followed by many cities around the world in October being shut down, and this time the idea is to, you know, we won't finish at a certain date. It won't be till the last person's dragged off the street. So the kind of analysis of what revolutions work is when lots and lots of people are in prison, basically. 3.4% of the population need to have a sympathy for a movement, and then it will change. It doesn't matter if 8% of them bloody hate you. Okay, but there's this shift that has to happen in the taxi drivers, which is happening already.
So from the movements then, if I could move on to Anna, some of the audience might be familiar, but for those who aren't, can you tell us a bit about some of the projects on a local scale that you've been stewarding here in Frome, or give us some of your highlights of the stuff you've managed to achieve and the stuff you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So I started in Frome about 5 years ago, and I thought, I'll link up with other sustainability officers at town council level. I couldn't find a single one, so I've kind of been on my own going, right, what should we do? And obviously thinking with the community and the councillors like Macfadyen to steer us towards what we want to do and what we can achieve, because as you might know, a town council is pretty small, it doesn't have much power, it doesn't have planning power, for example. It can do an amazing neighbourhood plan with the community and say we want to be one planet living, we want to be zero carbon, but it can't actually implement it. It can't provide bicycle routes, for example. It's pretty limited, and the budget is also pretty small. But there are loads of things that we can do. And one of the things we looked at first was, look, we are facing this climate emergency. Back in 2016, we committed to becoming a zero carbon town, and we had a report done and looked at what we could do. And basically, we only need 8 wind turbines to meet our electricity demands. It's not much. Peter and I, in 2015, set up Frome Renewable Energy Co-op. We raised £300,000 in like 3 days. They said we need 6 weeks to support putting community-owned solar on Frome Medical Practice and on the football club. And we had a really, really long list of people that wanted to invest in our next projects. Suddenly, the next month, the government slashed the feed-in tariff, so we couldn't, we've basically been stuck since then. But anyway, focusing on the positives, what we have been doing. We've got a team of people that can do energy advice, including people like Mick Dunn, that are involved in the Extinction Rebellion stuff, and also a councillor at Mendip. And we do energy advice sessions for people with fuel poverty, particularly over the summer. We've done big insulation offers, discounted insulation and free insulation. We've linked up with our partners in Europe to share ideas. We had 600 people come over a couple of years ago to look at how we switch away from fossil fuels to a renewable future. We've done things like the Improve Don't Move event that happened a couple of weeks ago, where we showcase basically eco-carpenters and builders and designers and architects. We've got an amazing resource in Frome, and it's just an opportunity to link up and look at how we can all integrate this stuff into our own lives. And then just simple things like we have a thermal imaging camera that can be borrowed through the town council or through the share shop. People can pinpoint places their homes are leaking heat. For example, when you have cavity wall insulation, you don't always know, you can't see through the wall, obviously, so you can see the gaps with these kind of things. So that's really good. And then just in March, we launched our Solar Streets campaign. We were working with a local installer called Idea, and basically, as you're probably aware, there's the solar panel price has come down about 80% over the last 10 years or so. So this time last year, it would cost about £6,000 to £8,000 for a 4 kilowatt system, a sort of standard domestic system. Under this scheme, if we can get 10 households to sign up, it's only £3,750, including £50 for local free solar for Frome YMCA. And so far we've had 90 people inquire about that, 50 surveys done, and we've had the first 15 that are starting to happen. So it's brilliant, but we need everyone to get on board. And we also need to look at ways that people that don't have £3,000 sitting in their back pocket can do that. But at least it's a start. We link with, sorry, I'm going to try to go on too long, but there's quite a lot of different things. We also link with local schools, and there's this amazing website, free website, that any area can use called Energy Sparks, which links up a school with their energy data and basically enables them to immediately see the impact of things like opening the doors at playtime or not. So business managers love it, because they're saving money, and it's a brilliant way to engage the kids around that. And then in the future, we're looking at hopefully doing a microgrid at the big Saxon Vale developments, which will mean that the Saxon Vale development should be carbon neutral. We can have about 1 megawatt of solar on all the roofs there, and obviously the buildings need to be very well insulated too. And it will use a microgrid to maximise the amount of energy, renewable energy, that's used on site, and to trade it between buildings. And then transport, I mean, it's a massive impact, but it's something that's really, really tricky to do, especially when you're not the transport authority. But we, a couple of years ago, got some funding to set up, or to help introduce the Co-Wheels Car Club to Frome. So we have a couple of hybrid vehicles that people can borrow. On average, a car club vehicle like that displaces about 10 privately owned vehicles. And somewhere like Frome, I'm sure you're all aware, the public transport system is pretty ropey. But one car club like that means that you don't have, if you're in a family, you've got access to a second car. You don't need to have 2 cars in your family, for example. We're always campaigning for better links at the train station and with the buses, with varied success. A couple of weeks ago, we did the School Active Travel Challenge, where we got 8 schools and 2,000 pupils to cycle and walk to school. And on average, I think they burned 500,000 calories, and on average, about 85% of them participated, which is amazing. And we're just really keen now to work with schools to make sure that people are continuing with that, doing walking buses, and really just minimising the amount they drive to school. Because things like air quality obviously makes a massive difference, especially locally actually. We've got places in Frome that are almost in breach of the European regulations for air quality, and obviously that affects children's health and our own health. So we have electric bikes at the psychology that people can hire at a discounted rate. And once you try one, they're perfect for Frome because you can go up the hills, and if you charge it at home, it'll be green, hopefully be green energy that's used. So I'd really recommend doing that. And then finally, my role also looks at reducing embodied carbon, because often when you think about climate change and things, you think about energy and solar panels, but you don't always think about the energy that's used to make the products that we all consume. So back in 2015, I helped set up the UK's first library of things, and we have over 600 items that people can borrow. The average drill is used for 13 minutes in its lifetime. It produces 14 kilograms of CO2 in its production, and obviously lots of disposal issues. It's crazy. We've all got all of this stuff that's producing a lot of carbon, where we could all be sharing it and linking together and supporting each other. And obviously there are issues with equity and enabling people to access things too. So that's really good, and I'd urge anyone that's not here, that's not a member already, to join us with that. And then in 2016 we set up the UK's first community fridge. And again, it's just a really small thing, but it does make quite a big difference. We had a study done a couple of weeks ago, and we found that that community fridge, through the network of volunteers who are absolutely amazing and link up with lots of supermarkets, they are sharing 90,000 items of food that would otherwise be thrown away. I mean, it's crazy that we've got a system that produces that amount of waste. It should be, illegal to be throwing away good food when there are people that are having to use food banks and not being able to feed their families. But aside from that, it's a pretty simple, easy thing that people can do. And we also found that through that system, we're saving about 140 tonnes of greenhouse gases. It's the same as driving 343,000 miles or something. So all of these things just do make a big difference, or at least start to make a difference. It can be replicated in other areas, which is one thing we're always keen to do. And then we also link with sort of businesses to look at their environmental, social and economic impacts and how we can make them go greener. And lots of fundraising and things like that. And obviously the whole plastic thing as well. We've been committed to being a single-use plastic-free council, and we're linking with lots of businesses and organisations to move away from single-use plastic.
Puts most towns to shame right there. Incredible list. I'm intrigued by the library of things. What are the kind of most common things that people borrow?
I think in particular tools are really good, because they're the sort of things that you need, just for a job here and there. But there's also other things, like things like stairgates. If you've got grandchildren coming, it's good to borrow those rather than buy them. And, things like children's toys, cookery stuff, ice cream makers, they don't get used that often, do they? But it's a nice thing to have occasionally. So, we just need a few more people to join, and then we'll be sustainable. So I think, and then every area should have a library of things, shouldn't they? It's just
it sounds so obvious as a concept when you say it. How does it not really exist? So you've outlined some amazing, really local, grounded things that you can sort of imagine just integrating into people's daily lives. Do you think that the council at all about some of the things you've outlined already about the wider social movements or the national questions or international? How do you see your relationship between, say, disruptive methods of protest, like blocking a bridge, and the community fridge? Is that something that's in your mind as you're scaling these two? Do you think it's best to just focus on the local?
I think we need to think of both things. And when we first set up our zero carbon sort of plan, we actually had the ex-president, he's actually the legitimate president of the Maldives, and Mohammed Nasheed came and sort of launched it with us. And he was saying, look, our islands are going to be underwater in the next, a few years, probably decades. We really need to think, you may have flooding issues in Frome, they're going to be nothing to what we're experiencing. So the whole global and local thing has always been at the forefront of what we're thinking about. But I suppose when you're looking at how to engage with people, particularly people that aren't so engaged with the whole thing, I've been quite keen to talk about things like clean and healthy and the impacts directly to Frome. And when you're looking at psychology and behaviour change, for example, if you can make it as locally specific as possible, then that kind of makes a difference. Because people don't always think about the global, but I agree that it's definitely good to have it as part of it.
And what have you found, because obviously there's a lot of people here, which is great, people who are by definition kind of already interested in these questions. When you're talking to people who might not be that politicised or think that they're interested in questions of climate change, what have we hinted at there, but what are the ways you find that articulating these questions resonate? What are the best ways from the question of municipal authorities and local governments do we get people on board?
Yeah, well, I do think it's things like clean and healthy. Like 40,000 people die prematurely because they can't breathe in clean air. Even in Somerset, 400 people die every year prematurely because they can't afford to heat their own homes. We need well-insulated homes, we need clean transport, active transport, moving away from fossil fuel vehicles. So it's those kind of things, I suppose, that highlight the positives for directly from the communities. But obviously, if I was at the county council, I'd be saying yes, bike lanes and cycling and exercise, because I'd be able to influence that a bit more, I suppose.
Yeah. So Hazel, let's move on to you. Climate despair has become somewhat of a condition of our age. Particularly scientists who work on this question have often found themselves working on it for years, seeing relatively little political action on the kind of scale that they're often saying needs to be done. It can be immobilising for a journalist writing about this question. It can seem daunting. Can you talk a bit about the magazine that we were talking about? What new things did you learn while doing it, and how did you feel by the end? Because I get the sense you felt quite hopeful. Is that right? Maybe, we'll see.
Yeah, I did. No, I sort of went on a journey. When I started reading about the science, which I was aware of, when I started reading the detail of the science, then you look up from your computer and you almost expect kind of nuclear dust to be falling. Like you can't imagine that everything's just carrying on as normal when these predictions are kind of hanging over you. And then, but actually the whole thing that motivated the magazine was trying to deal with some of these myths that it's too difficult or it's too complicated and it's not possible, so there's no point trying. So there's this really delicate balance, I think, to strike with people, understanding the dangers and not giving up. So like my neighbour who says, yeah, what's the point? I'm just going to go on lots of trips to Singapore so my son can see the coral reefs before they're all gone. Yeah, and because there's no point, they're never going to change. So that was like, I really wanted to do something accessible that people who were just using that really as an excuse not to engage with it would be harder for them to kind of take that view, I suppose, and also to inspire people. And so one of the things that I learned, I'm just going to mention 3 of them. It was actually in a pamphlet produced by something called the Rapid Transition Alliance called How Did We Do That? And they look, it's available online as a PDF, and they look back at moments in history when the governments have pulled off extraordinary things and repurposed energy and moved society's energy in very short time at scale in the face of an existential threat. And I mean, climate change is surely that. So that was really interesting. So that this pamphlet kind of broke these down. The one that probably people have heard of course, and are familiar with is World War II and the mobilisations around Dig for Victory and the amounts of allotments doubling. Also that people had pig clubs and rabbit clubs, and that they were fed with food scraps, and that actually food imports halved during the war. Or the fact that past 1941 not a single personal car was used because all the petrol had been requisitioned, and that everyone's used. And of course there's rationing is already well known, but that actually during that time that was a scientific diet and actually led to improved child mortality rates even though people were eating less food. So that which feeds into the things that Anna was saying about these things being quite good for you, or they're seen or even experienced sometimes as a sacrifice. So there was that example, and the other one was the global financial crisis, which is quite a different story, but just the very fact that we talk about is there enough money, or the financial constraints you might face, and this kind of incrementalism that says you can't do anything that doesn't show you're going to save money on a very short-term cost-benefit analysis. And when the global financial crisis was looming between autumn 2007 to the beginning of 2008, the states and central banks mobilised over 50% of the world's GDP to prop up our financial system. So this idea that we can't do it, or there's not enough money, when they want to, these institutions and governments can act. And then there was another example which is post-Soviet Cuba, which again was a very brutal, enforced transition. They lost access to oil almost overnight, and all the changes that they made in that country and how they managed to kind of survive that enforced low carbon transition. So they're all really interesting examples, and I encourage people to read it. It's short and accessible. And the other one that was in there was the case of the unpronounceable Icelandic volcano. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, but when it spewed out all that dust and no one could travel for 5 days or whatever it was, and it just talks about how various stranded prime ministers worked on Skype, and other people, got vehicles together and travelled home across Europe, and actually the world just carried on. There just weren't any planes. So just these little moments where, and then local supermarkets started to stop local produce because they weren't getting the food they were expecting. So just how quickly people can adapt, I suppose, is another one of its messages. So that made me hopeful. And then another thing that I suppose probably made me more angry than hopeful, but was a useful thing to remember, is that the top 10% of people in terms of wealth are responsible for 50% of emissions, and this was carbon emissions, and this was analysis done by Thomas Piketty and then later by Oxfam. And I knew that the West was disproportionately responsible for emissions. You might have 0.1 tonnes per carbon of a person living in Niger and 17 tonnes of carbon per person in the US and Canada. In the UK it's about 6, I think, or 8, depending what you include. But if you reduce the emissions of the top 10% of the richest people in this planet, if you reduce them just to the level of the average European, that would reduce the overall carbon emissions by 30%. You know, so it gives you a sense of how much is being driven just by sort of luxury lifestyles and, I guess, the status that encourage others to do the same. And I think there's a helpful guide there to policy making, and that leads you to things like, you know, frequent flyer tax and those kind of taxes which will target the people who are using the most, as opposed to everybody being stopped from doing things. You know, and I think that was useful piece of information linking to the inequality crisis, really. And then the third way was really quite technocratic. I studied social anthropology and I'm interested in human stories, so it's actually quite useful for me to get my head around the sort of engineering side and understand that all the solutions are already there. And there's this American engineer called Hal Harvey, which is a very American name, and he's created this amazing toolkit, which you probably like as well, actually. And you can tap in online certain policies and just watch the emissions dropping. So that might be zero emission houses. All new builds have to be, you know, to zero carbon specifications. It's phasing out hydrofluorocarbons, which are this super powerful greenhouse gas that's in fridges and air conditioners. We already know there are already clean alternatives, but they're not being used. So it needs to be legislated for and phased out. Setting minimum energy standards and setting rates of improvement so that things have to get better every year. And this stuff's like boring. It's like the non-sexy part of climate change. It's like it's already happening and it can just be done. So I think that helps you to feel that the answers are out there, and it's absolutely within government's capacity to do these things if they want to. And well, if they're not, then you have to think about why that is, but at least in theory it's possible. So I ended up feeling happier.
Well, I think one of the ideas that has provided some enthusiasm and some debate within the left and within wider society is the idea of the Green New Deal, which was authored, you know, some 10 years ago, and it was kind of a relatively marginal concept unless you're interested in this kind of stuff, which now is spoken about in newspapers all the time as a potential policy program, which could be a name for that kind of massive remobilisation of resources we were talking about. Could you just explain what the Green New Deal is and whether you think it's something we should be getting behind?
So yeah, so it's, as you said, it was actually something that was thought up in 2007 at the New Economics Foundation. There's now a new American version, which are people familiar with it? It sounds so this is just you get too into your magazines and you think everyone's reading the same stuff. So it's basically a very exciting proposal to decarbonise the entire US economy while also addressing social disadvantage and historical injustice. So it means it's being spearheaded by a young Democratic senator known as AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's just amazing. You just look her up anyway, just really amazing. And but actually, the proposal for a Green New Deal for this set of policies, which haven't been pinned down because they say they need to do this through some form of consultation with the affected communities, was actually started by something called the Sunrise Movement, which is led completely by young people who are lobbying Democratic senators and anyone else who will listen to try and get them to adopt this programme as they lead up to elections in November, I think. Anyway, so it's an inspiring policy programme with quite a sort of like a focused political goal, and it would involve things like it's thinking holistically. So by addressing the climate crisis, you remove pollution from the poorest neighbourhoods who suffer most from polluting industry anyway, and who are closest to it. And you also provide green jobs in new industries, and you retrain people who work in the fossil fuel industry, and you think about what will happen to people who make cars in Detroit, if there are any people left making cars in Detroit, the few who are left making cars in Detroit, what will happen to those secondary history. So it's a really ambitious plan. Actually, they're calling it a movement now more than a plan. It's like a set of values, but they're trying to turn it into real policies. And there's now a movement actually in the UK, Green New Deal for Labour, which is lobbying the Labour Party to adopt a similar set of proposals at the conference in September. So it sounds like it would be hard to criticise this set of ideas, but one of the critiques of it is that it's not questioning the global growth, the permanent economic growth model. And so it's just another form of like green capitalism, and under all these ideas, the economy's going to grow, we're going to create more jobs, and actually what we really need to do is to start contracting our economies and move to a kind of degrowth situation where we look at new ways of measuring well-being and just understand economics and success in a different way. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Kate Rayworth, who wrote Donut Economics, which is another really useful sort of economics text on this, which talks about planetary boundaries and how we need an economic system that stays within them. So there's no point, for example, this green revolution is going to require like rare earth minerals like lithium and cobalt. That's the materials that go inside the batteries and of the electric cars or the electric buses, and the other things we need, and where's that going to come from, and what's going to happen to the communities who live in the places where that's going to be mined, and what happens to their water supply. So you can't solve this crisis in a way that creates another crisis, of biodiversity or one of the many others. So those are some of the critiques, and I think what I would say is that it's too exciting a policy proposal to be against it, because I've just never seen anything as good as that, personally. Or it looks like it's straight out the pages of New Internationalist. I couldn't understand what I was like reading it out in the real world. But I think that actually, I think we do need to move to a different economic system, and degrowth is the way to go. But I think that actually capitalism can take us some of the way there, or the foundational aspects of it can be laid now. Because there are, as Yohann mentioned, the cost of solar and wind, that's market driven, and that is massively aiding the possibility even of a low carbon transition.
So Green New Deal or not then, Jamie, it certainly has to be internationalist, that being a precondition. You recognise that we live in a global economy, one that was forged by colonialism and then by neo-colonialism, and that these groups of sort of inequality and exploitation is still central to our economy. So we can have a lovely green UK whilst parts of the global south suffer to provide this for us. How has internationalism been part of XR? Because I get this thing, and one of the criticisms that people have made is that it's been insufficiently so, but it doesn't sound like it. And whenever I speak to you, it sounds like actually that consciousness is central to what's been going on so far. So how's it informed your practice?
Well, one of the things that's different about it is rather than just giving a nominal set of global south voices talking about what life is like in the global south, the fact that they've been living climate catastrophe, climate breakdown for 30, 40 years, they've been living under the original form of neoliberalism, which is colonialism. Vandana Shiva called neoliberalism, she said, same greed, different name. And instead of just having voices representing that, it's what we're doing is getting global south voices to describe what solidarity should look like. So they're framing the narrative themselves, which is a really different approach, and it's a longer approach. And what's emerging so far is, obviously there's lots of countries, lots of grassroots groups joining up with us around the world. But what's emerged so far is this consciousness of how many, so 70% of our biodiversity is protected by indigenous activists, right? So 70% of it. Yeah, and we all know about Bolsonaro in Brazil, who's just going to wipe out the Amazon and wipe out anyone who gets in the way of him doing that. So one of the things that people have started doing in regional groups over here is this project where they're going to send in obituaries to these murdered indigenous activists and put them in the local papers. Some of you will know about that amazing pink boat that we had in Oxford Circus. That was named after Berta Cáceres, who is a well-known murdered indigenous activist who was defending her environment. I think there's something like 10 indigenous activists murdered every week, protecting the lands against Western extractive industries. So one of the main things is to be developing this project where you're writing obituaries to these recently murdered people who are protecting 70% of the biodiversity. And this has been picked up by Leipzig in Germany and Melbourne in Australia. They're doing the same thing. And then what that builds to is funerals. So a lot of Extinction Rebellion, originally we were holding funerals, weren't we, for dead species. So people are now preparing to hold funerals for murdered indigenous activists. And the route can go past BP and drop some wreaths at BP for people who are standing up against BP and other companies or buildings that represent those people, those companies that those indigenous activists were murdered while standing up against them. The other thing that's amazing is Generation Z, right? So Generation Z, I'm a secondary school teacher, right? And you don't have to, so much that needs to be explained or weighed up and balanced morally with adults. You don't have to do anything with young people. Generation Z have this immediately. So Extinction Rebellion has XR Youth. And the first thing that they did, I think is amazing, is they have started linking up youth activists in this country with a youth activist in, say, Ghana. Ghana is one of the main countries that we were working with first. So they're linked up one-to-one. That means if our young activist over here gets arrested, the young Ghanaians will go and demonstrate outside the British Embassy, okay, over in Accra, and vice versa. So over here, if Ghanaian young activists are being picked up, then our activists will demonstrate outside the Ghanaian Embassy. So that's just started by XR Youth, that's their idea, which is great. And the other thing is twinning. So, you know, we often have twinned towns, don't we, over here? And so XR groups are twinning with Global South places. The first one is Bristol, twinning with Beira in Mozambique. So those are the kind of first things that are emerging, but it's a slow process. Rather than just grab some Global South voices and put them up and right, you speak, and then now you can stop speaking and we're going to get on with what we're doing. It's not happened this way around, where you actually listen for a really long time to, well, in fact, listening a long time to anyone is really important, by the way. But if you're working with Global South, it's going to be a long process for them to describe exactly what solidarity, international solidarity should look like.
That's amazing to hear. It just reminded me of some historical fact, which is that when Patrice Lumumba, who was first Prime Minister of the independent Congo in the 1960s, was assassinated with the help of the US and the Belgians, the Belgian colony. In Yugoslavia, hundreds of young students went and protested outside the Belgian embassy in Belgrade, I believe. And I remember reading this and just thinking, can you imagine anything like that happening today? There's a tradition of international solidarity, which was so strong in the last century, and I feel like the climate crisis has been rebuilding it. It's trying to rebuild it. And so it's really amazing to hear what you're saying. Another kind of issue, I guess, facing these kind of movements is the problem of big P mainstream politics. And Hazel mentioned Labour for a Green New Deal. It's a sort of accident of British political history that there are a handful of individuals around the Labour leadership who maybe kind of care about transforming capitalism, and they might be gone tomorrow, or they might capitulate, or whatever. But how do you think we should deal with mainstream politics, and say the Labour Party in particular?
That's a really tough one. A crew of XR decided to glue on outside Jeremy Corbyn's house, didn't they? And actually, it was interesting because the way the media covered it made it look like he just walked past and wasn't remotely interested, but he just will not talk to the media outside his house, which I think is a really wise thing to do. And in fact, he did meet with us and said, and that's how we set up a meeting with Labour, right? That Green New Deal thing that you're talking about is incredible, right? And the way we've been working, although we meet with all parties, what we're doing with all of them is saying, right, come along and have the talk. So some of you would have watched the talk like there's one online by Gail Bradbrook, there's one by Roger Hallam, but really this movement's been grown by thousands of times. This talk been given around the country, and this talk has a pause in it. So the first part of it is the science, and then there's the pause. The pause, you know, I'm not making it up, 90% of the time the pause is to cry your bloody eyes out. And then the second half of it is what we think we can do about it, right? So what we're doing is meeting with the politicians and saying, these are our 3 demands, this is all we're interested in talking with you about. And we'd also like to give as many of you as possible the talk. It's an emotional spin cycle And we feel that one of the things that we're going to do with the MPs is, you know, we're going to add a bit to the talk. So it's not just the emotional spin cycle as a human being, as a mum or a dad, but it's also, and you're a politician, and your power is not as much as you think that it is, because what's going to be necessary is profound systemic change. Okay, and really that's not totally within your remit, but you need to push yourself. Okay, that's, you know, the thing about this really is citizens' assemblies. Okay, so that's what's fascinating. The idea that if you bring a randomly chosen selection of the population that are demonstrably a microcosm of that society, so that's race, age, ability, gender, everything. It's a microcosm of society. And they get informed to the hilt, like 360-degree understanding of an issue. Okay, it's over 14 or 16 weekends, yeah? They can be trusted more than politicians. And what's really interesting is everywhere that's been happening around the world, one of the most common reactions is the population immediately go, screw politicians, man, I trust the people. And what's going to happen with the citizens' assemblies around this is, you know, if you look at all the young Generation Z, to go back to how it started, reparations is just totally blatantly obvious to them. There's no kind of mentality of, we just sort out our country. It just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist at all. And so, you know, the way that I see the opportunities for the citizens' assemblies is they're going to be very, very close to what the Green New Deal seems to be indicating. Okay. So, yeah, we meet with politicians, we say, here are 3 demands, come to the talk. You know, good luck, son. It's a difficult one, you know. Because you know, I don't know if you saw Michael Gove, our meeting with Michael Gove, and what Claire Farrell said when she came out. You know, she said, well, I thought it was going to be shit. It wasn't as shit as it was, but I thought it was going to be shit. And the fact was, you know, he just talked the talk, right? And then, you know, the next day made some major fossil fuel decision, you know. That's the thing, there's a total disconnection, I think. Just like you know, Hazel years ago did a magazine about food aggregate business, selling food business, right, which is just so dripping with evil. And she interviewed this is when we were doing Occupy, by the way, so I remember it really vividly. So she interviewed anonymously a guy who works in a hedge fund that deals in food, yeah? And he said, so remember that was 2011, he said, look, we're exactly the same as the kids in the riots that just happened. You see, when all the police were off the streets and all the shops were open and we could smash the windows, what happened was the kids suddenly got into a feeding frenzy and got separated from the consequences of their actions. And he said, that's us. That's basically how we all operate. And there's a real mindset that needs to be melted, and it won't happen overnight. You know? You've got to realise that lots of people know all this. All the politicians know this. Yeah, they're not stupid. They know it. They haven't done anything about it the whole time. They're fixed in this thing of, I've got a career, I've got to get votes. Sorry, you know. So systems really let us down.
Great. So Anna, we were generally talking there about alternative forms of power and democracy and governance. Municipal and local governments, at least according to one narrative that's been gutted in this country for sort of decades, power has been increasingly centralised in Westminster. Although the coalition government's localism bill kind of vaguely changes to an extent, I think. As someone who's seen it at this level, what do you wish you could do at a local level that you can't? Are there any models from abroad we should be emulating? What needs to change?
I mean, I suppose, working for an independent town council, I believe that relocalising and having power at the local level is really important, because it seems crazy that, for example, with planning, you know, we can't say, well, we can say what we want, or what the community wants, but we don't have the power to actually implement it. That's made by people that have not necessarily got any connection at all, or have even seen the sites that we're talking about, for example. So relocalising that. I suppose with transportation, you know, things like bike lanes and having, you know, safe cycling and walking routes, it's fundamental stuff, but we don't have that power. Obviously, you need to have a whole overview of the whole system, but, you know, if you talk about cost-benefit analysis, the cost-benefit analysis of a cycle lane is like, I don't know, 100-fold out of the road. I mean, all those kind of things, just relocalising it and enabling local people to make decisions. Because as you say, once they're educated and realise the impacts of things like that, then we can all get together and actually make a difference. When it's taken, you know, when those decisions, when they're separated from the decisions and it's, politicised and, people say, oh, not Frome again, we're not going to support them, or, or we're going to do something just to, stop them doing things, then, I mean, that's the old side of things, we've mended it hopefully. But, relocalising and having the local power. Same with things like energy, I suppose, you know. At the moment, it's really, really hard to get any wind turbines through. If we had the local power to actually say, actually, we do want a wind turbine. You know, this is a climate emergency. We only need 8 wind turbines to meet our electricity demands, to enable a safer future for our children. You know, then we could probably actually do that. But because, it's distanced and separated from us. And obviously all the national stuff. I mean, and just enabling people to insulate their own, you know, having the Green Deal, not the Green New Deal, but the Green Deal. You know, it enabled, in Germany, most people do the Green Deal because it's 1 or 2% interest. You basically can have a loan, pay back, you know, you can put insulation in your home and everything for free, and then you pay back the loan over the energy, according to the energy savings that you've made over that time. But when we did it in the UK, it was 6 or 7% interest. It was too much. We just need a mechanism to enable people to switch. But I agree, we also need systemic change and to move away from capitalism and constant growth.
In terms of community-owned power, what was your experience in that like? And say if people in their own community or borough or whatever wanted to do something similar, what would you advise them to do, and what are the maybe pitfalls that you've discovered that they could avoid?
Well, community-owned power is a brilliant model because it basically means everybody wins. You know, our investors got 6% return on their investment. At the time, there was also a tax break, which meant they got a third of their investment back. The building users get a discount on electricity, it saves loads of carbon, and all the income goes into a community fund to support people suffering from fuel poverty or to reduce carbon emissions further. So it's a really, really powerful win-win situation. The difficulty of it is that we just never know what the government's going to do, and suddenly to slash the feed-in tariff like that, to put extra planning regulations and around things like wind, but also hydro. You know, Frome used to have the most mills or most hydro systems along a stretch of river in the UK when it was doing all the milling and, you know, the whole cloth industry. We would love to do a community-owned, you know, hydro system, but on average it takes about 5 years to set up a hydro system in the UK because you have so much negotiation with the Environment Agency, which should be supporting this stuff. You know, it's just so I would say, link up with other community energy co-ops and, you know, work together. One of the things we're also doing is linking up with other energy co-ops in Somerset and setting up Somerset Community Energy so that we can all sort of link together and really just share expertise and support each other. You know, these things happen, and also scale up. You know, we need bigger projects. Another key barrier is that, you know, when you basically, with solar, for example, you rent the roof space, so for 20 years, and a lot of businesses don't want to necessarily commit to 20 years, so we need to look at ways that it can be more flexible. And many, you know, bigger investors like pension funds should be investing. Somerset County Council invests £184 million in fossil fuels, something like £82 million of which is in fracking. And, you know, that's our money. That could be going into community energy, local, clean community energy that we all want and need. And they're investing in that. And they say, you know, when I go to them, they say, oh no, there's no appetite for clean energy at the moment. Clean investment. It's like, oh right, according to who? I mean, so, yes. Link up, learn from others, and let's, I think unite and just get together. But also, community energy is great, but, you know, it doesn't have to be community energy. I'm fine with a private person just coming in and doing it. We just need a massive switch away from fossil fuels as soon as we possibly can.
So Hazel, sometimes something you might hear, or sort of, if you can bring yourself to watch Question Time or listen to any questions, one of those shows. It's painful, I know. But you'll hear government ministers say, actually, you know, the UK is leading the world in reducing our carbon emissions. We just went a week without a coal fire. Hazel, when you hear that, and you're done sort of destroying everything in your wake, what are the arguments we need to counter those? Because I'm hearing it more and more, actually. And it's a very reactionary narrative that is very useful. What's going on with this story that actually things are okay in Britain?
Yeah, it would be okay if they had Anna on the panel, and then I think she could tell them exactly how they work managing to do that. I mean, I think, obviously it's good, a week without coal is good, so you have to recognise that. It's positive that there is a net zero strategy by 2050. In principle, that's a good thing. But there's a couple of things I would say in response, which is, none of it is enough, right? So, and that isn't making the perfect the enemy of the good or just being fussy. If you look at the changes needed, the drop is just precipitous. If you look at the IPC reports and what fossil fuels have to do, it's not that, it's that. And anything less means, we're first thing. And the second thing is that there's a total lack of consistency, and I think you just said it all really, and we've been on the receiving end of it, but the solar subsidies being scrapped. Another one was a plan for all homes to be built zero carbon, was scrapped in 2016, and that accounts for built environment accounts for 40% of emissions. I've got a friend who lives in one of those new build houses, and his energy bills are like a zero carbon house, and his energy bills are like less than £100 a year. But who wouldn't want that for their family anyway? And then there's also kind of cognitive dissonance that I would say that we have to call out. So I'm sure this is familiar to everyone in the room, but anyway, expanding Heathrow, pursuing fracking. They opened a new North Sea oil platform while at climate talks in Katowice, like being a climate leader. And the evidence shows that all the fossil fuels have to be phased out from now on, like from this point, phased out from now. So none of it can happen. And then the other thing is that there is it's this problem of selective accounting, and again, you don't want to sound like sour grapes over everything, but Kevin Anderson, who's a climate and energy professor, who's very outspoken on this topic, I mean, it's quite pathetic, essentially, what countries have done in the last 28 years, and maybe that's going to change. But one thing you hear a lot is the UK saying they've reduced their emissions by 40% since 1990. Has everyone heard that claim? They say it a lot. So, and then what Kevin Anderson does is he brings in emissions from aviation and shipping, which aren't included in the Paris Climate Accords. He says he doesn't know who's meant to be responsible for them. Maybe it's God. It's his line on that. But and they don't include our what are called consumption emissions, which are the emissions embedded in the things that we use in this country. And once you do that, the UK's reductions and other climate leaders like Denmark are virtually unchanged. So I think it's about actually 11%. So in 28 years, that's quite poor. So the other final thing to say is that then, when you've said all those things, if anyone's still listening to me talking at the radio or the TV, then you'd say you have to remember our historical or cumulative emissions that you've mentioned, which is, we're the 5th highest in the world, and our countries produce the 5th highest amount of CO2 in the world. And then we're also the 6th richest country in the world, and our economy is really advanced and efficient anyway, so it's actually much easier for us to cut carbon than other countries that are at a sort of dirtier stage of their development. And according to not even taking the cumulative historical emissions into account, a country of our size and of our wealth and the usage that we have now needs to be cutting by 10 to 20% every year. And that's a massive change that the government needs to be legislating for. So, it's not good enough.
But there is one of the positive aspects you write about in the magazine is the example of Costa Rica. And obviously Costa Rica isn't a core capitalist nation like the UK plays a role, but it is a nation state whose political leaders have really done some quite ambitious things. Can you talk a bit about Costa Rica and any other role models or positive things out there that we should be emulating here?
Costa Rica is an interesting example. It's one that I used in the magazine, and it also shows how quickly things are moving, because at that time, in about March, they were one of the only countries that had a zero carbon plan for 2050, and now there's actually about 5, including this country. So it just shows how quickly people are, at least in theory, having rubbish that. At least people are in theory trying to work towards these more ambitious targets. And they were actually one of the first people to do it. And I think the reason they're interesting is that they run on almost 100% renewable energy. And that's partly because they have geothermal from volcanoes and hydro, and also wind and solar. But those were also decisions that were made in that country to pursue that energy. And they also have, so as a result of that, most of their emissions are from the transport sector. And they now have a sector-by-sector plan to go carbon neutral by 2050. And they're not a rich country, they're like a middle-income country. So they're going to bring in electric tram lines, they're going to incentivise electric cars and have electric buses, and they're going to use the 1.6 billion that they currently use to import oil to run their transport system. They're going to use that money to transition to And I think the thing I like about them is really two things. I was speaking to a journalist there called Diego Ortiz, and the way he talked about it, he says, if you look at the current trends of emissions, which as we know are like still rising, you'd just despair and you wouldn't think you could change it. And so what we do is we use a backcasting system, so we look at where we want to get to and we work backwards from there, so that's how they approach it. He said we set our best goal and look at how to get back to the present. And the way he put it, he said it's impossible to believe what you can't imagine. So this is all about putting this down to a point where like, oh right, it would be like this is how. Because first of all, it gives you panic, doesn't it? Saying, well, you can't have gas. Oh, gas. How would I live without gas? Like the sound of your boiler turning on every morning, or the thing you use, or boiling water to make a cup of tea. It's like you would use something else, or it would be different. It's like you have to get that sense when things aren't being taken away, they're being changed. And the vision of this, their environment minister, I'll just quote him here, he said, by 2035, my grandchildren will have the same footprint as their grandparents in 1940, and by 2050, none at all. So I just like their vision and ambition maybe as an example that richer nations could emulate.
So on that positive note, I think it would be a good moment to open up to questions, comments, discussion.
Sorry.
There is a roaming mic somewhere, I think. If not, we'll have two. So I can, if you want to do, oh, this one, yeah. Okay. Is there another one? Where's one there?
I think there was another one actually.
Do you want to... yes, so any questions?
It's great.
Yes.
Why isn't overpopulation growth more of an issue? Because when you consider how the number of children on planet Earth continue to grow and consume and take raw the Earth of all its resources, it's bigger than now, and yet it's rarely mentioned.
Sure, okay, we can take maybe a few questions at a time and then do them. Any others? The first one's on overpopulation.
I'd just like to ask about assembly. So, issue around what happens when you get a group of people together and say, if some of those people don't have an idea about what's going on climate change-wise, and then they have to go through a process of grief. So it's kind of like you've lost your child, and then all of a sudden you're being expected to make a really wise choice. Where you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You know what? Shit.
That's a good question.
Is there one here?
I'm wondering how you make sure that any change that we have doesn't disadvantage the poor in an unequal way, and maybe even goes towards readdressing some of the wealth inequality that we have.
Great, so let's take those three for now. So overpopulation, citizens' assemblies, and inequality, disadvantaging the poor. Does anyone want to go first?
Just say quickly on population. I think it's easy, like in the current climate, to get this feeling that humans are this kind of voracious thing that's like destroying everything, and it's easy to feel like a bit misanthropic. But I think what we always say at Internationalist is it's not so much the number of people as what they're doing or how they're managing their resources or how much resources they're consuming. So often the kind of onus is put on poor people should be protecting their environment better, but actually you've got a very small section of the population who are using way more than their fair share in a way that's just almost hard to witness, I think, increasingly. So for us, the focus is on not so much numbers of people, but the resource use of a certain kind of person is actually how you would, in terms of carbon especially, cut emissions the fastest if you focus on those people.
I guess this is sort of a class analysis with a structural analysis, because not all people are the same in the amount they produce. And there's that fact that 100 companies, corporations existing, produce 71% of all carbon emissions.
I think, there's also just one small example there. There was a study of oceans called Bright Spots, and it looked at certain places and remote places and populated places around Papua New Guinea and around Australia. And it was really interesting because it actually found that the highly populated areas had the most fish, because actually the other areas there was either, well actually partly because trawlers were going in and no one could stop them, but the large numbers of people living there, they were just managing their resources well, and they were using like a feasting and fasting cultural methods of conservation really that they'd used for centuries, and that they were actually able to fish in a way that didn't kind of exhaust their resources. So I wouldn't underestimate people's ability to do that when they're not kind of under strain from external forces.
Any more of the population, or would you move into citizens' assembly?
Citizens' assemblies? That's a really great point, actually, because, as I said earlier, these talks that Extinction Rebellion have been giving, they do have a section for grief, and that's almost always filled up by people seriously grieving. So if you are going to put people through, well, we will. When we put people through the deliberative democracy process, yeah, there's no way you can do that without having some facility for holding their grief as well. Absolutely. Crazy not to. We're rolling out a program of people's assemblies, actually. So people's assemblies are very different to citizens' assemblies. They are, anyone can come, it's a gathering of people, and it's really just a well-facilitated, large crowd conversation. But there's one set of assemblies that we're rolling out already, that we started rolling out from the International Rebellion. But there's a second set of assemblies that we want to roll out with the regional groups, but we can't until we work out a kind of grief-holding process for those groups, because the second set of assemblies are assemblies where local communities come together and discuss what will we do when the food prices triple overnight. What will we do when there's no cash in the ATMs? What will we do when there's no medicine in the local hospital? So you can't really have assemblies like that until people are actually being put in the right sort of psychologically strong position to be able to have those conversations in the first place. Can you imagine if you're just like a mum walking home with your kids and this looks interesting, there's a bunch of people having a conversation. No one's going to look after you when you kind of become familiarised with those kind of realities. So yeah, there's no way we could do that without having a really well thought out grief-holding process. It's a really good point, thank you.
Just to jump in with a small, really practical thing. I know in Oxford they're going to be doing a citizens' assembly and they've got that moving now. But at a meeting I was at, a woman was talking about it, and she said one of the first things people said in the poorer areas of Oxford around the edge of the city is that obviously they don't want electric cars, we just want better public transport. So I think some of those things come up really quickly and really easily without necessarily having to go through the grieving process. They're just, people know what they need as well.
And finally, was a point about poverty and inequality not re-intensifying those existing trends.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it depends if you're looking globally or locally, but from the local perspective, one of the things we've always been keen on is to ensure that, all these things are accessible and inclusive. So, like with the share shop, we've just started doing an impact analysis, and we found that through sharing rather than borrowing, communities saving around £65,000 a year just through sharing and paying a little bit for a drill rather than buying it. We've done lots of things around repair cafes to enable people to get their stuff fixed rather than having to throw it away and buy new stuff. With the community fridge, obviously there's a direct link with, the fridge is actually available for anybody to use, so there's no stigma around it, and so that everybody feels happy using it, and there's been some interesting connections as a result of that. But obviously there are people in need that use it a lot, and some homeless and some people that top up from the food bank. And in the longer term, the energy co-op, Frome Energy Co-op, has always wanted to do like a local energy tariff, and that would be, based on local energy supply, renewable energy supply, and there's no reason that would go up, a tiny amount every year, to perhaps linked with inflation or whatever, but it wouldn't be going up, suddenly 10% like it has done with dirty energy over the last few years. So it's all about looking at how we can enable these things to be accessible. And things like cycling and walking, we've got the electric bikes that are discounted and free for people on certain benefits or connected to the health centre. With a car club, although people may think, oh look, it's £4 or £5 an hour, actually that's much, much cheaper than running your own vehicle, for example. And then we also have a brilliant volunteer driver scheme, which connects people as well. So it's all about connecting people and enabling, and just involving everybody really, and not having that big divide.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that's become really interesting actually is when you start talking about carbon zero net by 2025, people are, the general public are going, what, I'm going to live in a cave with a candle and a carrot, right? And what's become really interesting is, no, actually, there's a really good argument to say life will be a shed load better than it is now. I remember when Hazel started researching for this mag, and at that time I was working on a lot of the messaging stuff for XR, right? And the fact is, at that time anyway, I don't know if it's still true now, it might be, but the second biggest killer in this country is loneliness. There's no way we're going to get through this unless we actually remember what the hell community is again, yeah? You know, there's a Bangladeshi activist that we're working with in Extinction Rebellion. She said, you know, you've got a real serious problem where you live. And I go, what? She said, well, where I live, you know, because she was an activist in Bangladesh for a long time and then had to move over here. But she said, you know, we were always looked after because we have a thing called community, which you don't have here, you know. There was a talk that we gave down where I live. I run a kind of local political platform, Independence, taking over, inspired by Flatback's Moxie. And we gave a talk about what it would look like. And we were very much along the lines of this brilliant stuff that you're doing, you know. And we described, you know, people growing food and then we'd share our food, you know. He does rhubarb, he does beets, she does beans or whatever. And then sharing all your tools, exactly the way you're talking about, having coffee evenings, you know, looking after, talking with the elderly people. And this old lady, well, she wasn't old, she can't be much older than me actually, she's about 60, she put her hand up, right? You've just described my bloody childhood. And it's been the horror of my life that in one lifetime that's gone. Life was so brilliant when I was a kid. We all talked to each other. Of course we shared, you know, there's one lawnmower in the street. We all shared it. There was no elderly people sitting on their own. We all spoke to each other the whole time. We'd all share our food. You know, she just listed this kind of idyllic existence. And it was her childhood. You know, we're being atomised. There's one of our most powerful, most popular blogs, online pieces, is called The Demoralised Mind. I really recommend you read it, right? And it's just, you know, it's only about a page, written by a guy called Joel Schumacher. And it talks about the horrific psychological impact of being alive now, you know? And all the kind of transitions that we're talking about, if we're going to go to carbon zero, all those transitions seem to be reversing what seems to be a pretty horrific life. You know, there literally is an epidemic of mental health issues for young people. I'm a teacher. You know, and I'm telling you now, a huge amount of that is because of being online. You know, and that's really carbon intensive. That will have to go, you know. So it's a strange thing. It's not going to be necessarily, you know, well, it's not going to be a candle and a carrot in a cave. It's very likely going to be a much better world, you know. It's really worth you know, promoting that, and that's why this mag's pretty cracking, actually.
Hazel, you had something?
No, I just wanted to answer on a kind of policy level, the sorts of things you see in connection with the Green New Deal and things like that are policies that are specifically designed to combat wealth inequality. So some ideas are for a carbon tax, for example, that means that if it's more expensive to do things that pollute, and you use that money to subsidise the cost of carbon for people who are poorer, or for them to use that to retrofit their homes or subsidise the changes that they need to make to get on board with the low carbon transition. So I think there's loads of ways you can structure taxation in a way that makes sure some of that money comes back just by doing it on the amount that's used, because people who are richer use way more than everybody else. And the frequent flyer tax is another one. And then
I mean, it shows the way all these issues are so interconnected: poverty, climate change, social atomization under neoliberalism, restoring community. Just another one I was thinking of, given the ongoing news, is the anti-war movement. So what's the single largest, most polluting organisation in the world is the US Army. And we're having this discussion just as they're planning their next war, the one they've been planning for several decades now. But if there is a revived anti-war movement in this country, like there was at the time around Iraq, climate change will need to be central to that question as well, because it's about emissions.
Sorry,
it's coming, yeah.
So I just wanted to share, I think the other thing I would say is that it isn't just that it needs to address wealth inequality, it's that unless the strategy does address those things, then who's going to fight for it? Like, everybody needs to fight for this, and this is something that an activist said to me in South Africa, and her line was, unless the transition lifts up the majority, no one will be on the streets fighting for system change. She said, middle-class people with their bellies full can tell someone they face extinction in a couple of decades, but a decade can be hard to imagine, she said. In South Africa, 49% of people are food insecure and 7 million have HIV. They're thinking, how do I feed my hungry child? So the answers need to speak to the realities of those people who have very little, the 50% of people who have no power, say, in South Africa. But she was really positive, although that is a very hard quote to read, because she was actually spreading renewable technology, completely decentralised technology, solar panels and insulating schools, and people were instantly seeing that their children were warmer and they were saving money. So these things need to be cheap and controlled and owned by the poorest, and then they will fight for them. That was what she said. I think the same is true in this country too.
More questions, comments, thoughts? Yeah, I've got something.
Hi, I'm really interested in how you have a dialogue with the 10%, because that just really struck me as really where
I don't know the details of the Green New Deal, but from what you mentioned, you said that it could be a green form of capitalism. Are there many people that are promoting this deal who only see it actually as a stepping stone to a more socialist cooperative state? Or do they really just concentrate on the New Deal being an end in itself?
Third question here.
And so this isn't a question, but it's just a comment on the overpopulation issue. It's been proven time after time to educate women, more of their children stay alive and they opt to limit their families. So hopefully, with this better new world that we want, we can include female education, and then people who have large families will choose to limit them. They won't be so afraid of their children dying, so they have lots and lots of children.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so to raise the question of power, who owns the global bridge, and how do you wrest that from Monsanto's hands?
Great, so a dialogue with the 10%.
I mean, I think that, do you dialogue with them or do you just legislate, in ways that curtails their consumption?
Yeah. Well, look, the 10% globally, if that's what we meant. So the top 10% of the global average income, I don't know how they work out the averages, is an income of £10,000 a year. So that's 90% of the people in this room.
You'd have, is that the one that was used in their actual study?
No idea.
Yeah, because I think it can depend a little bit on, there's lots of statistics, but I know it's lots of
But you
people.
get the point that it's not,
it starts here.
30, 80 grand.
I think what it is that, because the way I'm taking it is that they say that to take the top, so they say to reduce it to the level of the average European, which is the same as this country. So if you're someone using an average amount of energy in this country, then you wouldn't qualify for that group. So it would have to be someone who was, I guess, using more than the national average. So, well, when Kevin Anderson talks about it, he says it means professors, it means people, it means people who fly a lot, he says, people who travel, the global elites is how he describes it. But it's definitely probably includes some of us who have carbon-intensive lifestyles, depending on what car we drive and how often we travel on flights. But in terms of the dialogue, one thing that people talk about is the sort of behaviour change. So if you think about what happened in the Second World War, when people couldn't, there were obviously there were far fewer cars in those days, but to have nobody allowed to drive a car, it didn't matter if you were in the top 10% or the bottom Amsterdam, you just couldn't drive one. But that didn't happen like overnight. That was a massive mobilisation. That was the government put everything it had into that propaganda campaign to mobilise in a sort of war situation. So you'd need a similar campaign really, so that it became sort of morally toxic to be consuming that amount of carbon or wasting that amount of carbon in a context where there just wasn't any left, or the climate impacts were hitting ever harder, particularly in the rich world, which seems to help people understand the problem better. So that's why I'd say the two ways to affect them really. But I think Thomas Piketty, who wrote the paper, had a series of ideas for ways you could tax carbon use by the richest people, and he talked about basically incentivising national states so that it was in their interest to sort of pull those people in step with everybody else, is how they talked about. So it does depend on having a kind of global deal and a global arrangement so that everyone doesn't just run to the one place where you can do whatever you like.
And the next one was about the Green New Deal as a sort of transitional stage onto socialism or anything itself.
I mean, I suspect most people who are backing it are more of the green capitalist variety, because it sounds like a good kind of business as usual solution. But I think even the changes that have been talked about in connection to that are the kind of society we want to live in anyway. So I think it means that's like a gateway to like different ways of measuring success and well-being, I think. But that is one of the key things to watch out for, I agree.
And the global fridge in Monsanto.
Who owns your fridge?
Oh, is that what it was? I'm sorry, I didn't realise that was a do with the question. What was the question?
Do you want to repeat the question?
Who owns your fridge?
Yes.
Who owns my fridge?
I've got it from me mum.
This idea of power, though, relates to obviously food scarcity, and where it's all heading. And obviously climate change being now a militarised issue, a number of high-level papers from Whitehall are doing long-term planning around the whole militarisation of borders and utilisation and stockpiling resources. That's all taking place right now. The planning, in fact, and the resources going into that far exceeds what's happening on the ground, even though that's very positive. I just wonder at what point do all these fantastic initiatives start scaling up to a point, a tipping point, where we are not looking at capitalism just to give itself a bit of a greenwash, which I don't think is the way forward ultimately. I think it's very good at window dressing, to something more meaningful and truly sustainable.
Yeah, well, with the community fridge, I mean, it's an example of anarchy in action. For example, it's mutual aid, it's people coming together to support each other. So I agree, we need all of this happening, and a lot of the scenarios we've been talking about. This future where we have to move away from our energy-intensive screens and things, and grow our own vegetables and share stuff together. It is a different system, and it is, maybe a tipping point that moves towards a different system that does support each other more.
It's a really scary thing that you're pointing out, and if you look at the processes that have been in place for years, where food has already been stockpiled, and also the kind of sources of food are being sort of fenced off massively and owned by states, that's not something that's being done to increase wealth at that moment. It's to do with power in the future, which is what they're looking at, which is absolutely bloody terrifying. Yeah. And what are you going to do about that? It's like, we named earlier on, the biggest emitter in the world is the military-industrial complex, so they tie in with that gig as well. So the only things I can hope for is, Hazel picked up a great phrase, which is moral campaign. Right? So usually our moral I don't know, I'm not old enough to think of Barbara Whitehouse when I think of moral campaign, right? But just look at this, right? So in the 30s, look at Goebbels' propaganda and look at cars. Look at what cars looked like in 1938, yeah? And look at what propaganda looked like in 1938. Propaganda in 1938 managed to make an entire nation think that the scapegoat of the Jewish nation are the problem and they should be exterminated. And that's absolutely fine. That was the level of propaganda in 1939, yeah? okay? And think of the cars then. You know, the cars then make Skoda cars look really bloody groovy, yeah? So now, look at our cars now. Our cars now are like, you know, the Starship bloody Enterprise. And so is our propaganda. So when you think about moral campaign, all this amazing skill of manipulation of the way people think, yeah, has been thrown up against the wall to make you want to buy a car or make you feel good if you go on a holiday. Those same skills of manipulation can easily be used to have a proper moral campaign. What's strange about this, well, there's so many things that are strange about this bloody species, but one of the things that's really strange about this species is we can actually, you know, within a generation, go through a moral evolution. You know, when the idea of women having the votes, it's like, no bloody way, women aren't going to have the votes, it's not going to happen. Or slavery, you can't abolish slavery, mate, the whole world runs on slavery. But within a generation, things shift on a moral choice. So this idea that, you know, and then you get into the really scary world. You know, Cambridge Analytica, yeah? So that pink-haired guy, what's his name? Chris, isn't it? Chris? Is it? I don't know anyway, really. My mum always said, never ruin a story with the details, Jamie. But what that fella said, right, he said, look, people haven't quite gathered what's happening, yeah? It's the mixture of big data, artificial intelligence, and algorithms, right? And he said, this is what it is, man. So, and I hung out with him for a while, right? And he's an okay guy. This is what it is. In the old days, you're in a market square, town square of Frome, let's say, right? And there's someone standing on a platform pontificating, all right? And everyone's going, what do I think? I don't know. I just have a balanced view, all right? He said, now you're all in the square, there's no one on the platform, but there's a ghost in everyone's ear. And that ghost knows you better than your mum knows you. And that ghost knows exactly what to say to spin your melon. Okay? That's what Chris said. And that's very frightening. So obviously, being, you know, a cheeky bloke, I said, let's get the technology on the right side, Chris, because at the moment it's being used, you know, for dark money. So what I'm getting at is, you know, when you use a phrase like moral campaign, we actually have these extraordinary tools that have been completely wasted to sell us crap and turn us into racists and make us think that my life means nothing unless I get loads of likes on Facebook, for God's sake. And these tools, crazy tools, but they've been wasted so far, you know. So there is this extraordinary opportunity. And then you touch on this idea of, you know, if you really did that, wouldn't it be amazing if, you know, there was someone driving down, because I feel like this, but I'm sure not many people do, but at the moment, when there's someone in a super expensive, massive carbon-eating car, I'm just ashamed for them. I'm literally ashamed for them, you know. Wouldn't that be amazing if that's what everyone did? Because then that wouldn't be quite a great thing, you know, it wouldn't feel like a great symbol. Just like, come on, mate, you're being embarrassing. You know, flying on holiday. Why are you doing that? You know? Like smoking, exactly, like smoking. Good example, which I gave up in January, so I can agree with you. Until January, it was very cool to smoke, by the way.
That point about borders is also important because there's, I think, on the left we need to pay particular attention to what's been termed eco-fascism, which is this sense that the far right, rather than doing what the traditional conservative right does, which would be just deny the existence or say the market will solve it, have actually been embracing environmental light policies, complementing it with policies of protected militarised borders. You know, climate change is going to produce all these climate refugees, therefore we need militarised borders. Hazel, do you have something to add about eco-fascism? Were you talking about that earlier? No.
I just thought I'd make a good question.
Oh, there you go.
I do have something to say.
Yeah.
I think the thing that eco-fascists and kind of military security think tanks have in common, and in some ways Extinction Rebellion is something to like keep an eye on, is this like apocalyptic visions, right? And part of them is saying, you know, sort of bring on the apocalypse, we're ready. And I think that's why we just have to, for me, anyway, it's just my opinion, I think we have to refuse to kind of accept that, because all the things that go with it are from their worldview, and they're very frightening. And they say, oh, we'll be flooded with refugees, so we have to protect our borders, as opposed to we need a refugee system that allows, you know, people fleeing environmental degradation to reach places of safety. They're not going to come up with the right answers. So I think we also have to reject the framing, because how still time to stop it. Like, that's surely the most unconscionable thing. So it's like, it's our duty to be looking, studying, talking, discussing, weighing up all the things we could be doing, rather than getting lost in kind of apocalyptic scenarios that these kinds of people have a vested interest in, like, pushing for some personal need.
Should we do one more round of questions, and then afterwards, we're here until 9 and we'll be having tea and cake, and you can grab people and talk to them more. Yeah.
Thanks for most of you joining us. Suppose I wanted to reduce my own personal carbon footprint by, say, 25% next year. How would I decide which were the most effective steps to take, giving up meat, giving up the wine, cleaning my car, turning the second heating down, so on, etc.? How would I decide what the most effective action would be, and how would I actually measure my carbon footprint?
Great. You want to hear, John?
So much of this seems to come down to power and who holds power. And I wonder if Extinction would really need fourth command, which is for governments to decentralise power and localise power. Because you're building new ways of making decisions. Even when Frome Town Council has all the maximum power it can have, it's still limited. So maybe that will help push things along.
About Extinction Rebellion, can I just ask, do you think it's worth paying attention to the conspiracy theories that go around about it? I mean, I don't know about other people's news feeds, but every time I see something about Extinction Rebellion and climate change online, there'll be some people posting the same videos claiming that it's controlled opposition and start a way of ushering in more taxing and one world government and the UN plots. And Gail Bradbrook is a business representative and all this kind of thing. Do you think it's worth paying it any attention? And if so, is there anyone who is actually addressing it? That might be putting out a clear step-by-step refutation of all the sort of smearing and conflation that's in these videos. And could you spell it out for us here?
And then finally, let's take one more that's behind me.
You raised the subject of AI, and that is in the hands of massive corporations worldwide. Have you given any thought of how we can control the use of AI? Because at the moment, I don't see how the everyday man in the street can benefit from it if it's corporate control. And that's going to influence our lives imminently.
So should we take this in reverse order? So AI and corporate control of various emancipatory potential. Anyone on the panel want to?
We've been chatting ages. Do you want to go for it? So AI is absolutely terrifying because, as you say, the people who are going to have the first power over it are the super rich. And you've got to ask yourself, how do they become super rich? And generally, their love of humanity and their wish for sort of a well-being for the future of humanity has clearly not been high on their list of priorities. And I think it's a very scary time. I'll give you a really useful anecdote, actually. We gate-crashed a Cambridge Analytica party. Carol Cadwallader, who was that great journalist who actually blew the story, right? And she hadn't blown the story at the time, I didn't know that well, but she rocked up in a leather jacket, and she seemed like a punk rocker, bloody marvellous. And we went to this, and it was a posh hotel, Park Lane, went downstairs, incredibly posh party. Half of the people there were under 25 East European prostitutes, under control of two women, and the other half were billionaires who all went to Eton, okay? And it was, so the whole atmosphere was really weird. And I didn't know that we were going to be doing that, so I looked really scruffy. And I was amazed I managed to blag in. But I just went immediately for the only other person who looked as scruffy as me. And of course it was the coder, right? So I was chatting with this guy, I said, what the hell, tell me what Cambridge Analytica are doing. And he started to tell me, and I completely lost it. I was just incandescent at this, right? And Alexander Nitz is over there with his mate, and they've spotted me, and the mate comes over and starts talking to me, right? And I say, look, he's just explained to me what it does. You are literally buying democracy. You're literally robbing democracy. You know, then I got all self-important that was going, you know, I was in Occupy London, I know that when people are heard equally and they understand the issues, they're to be trusted, and democracy is so valuable. The guy didn't miss a beat. The point I'm making is this, he didn't miss a beat, and he just immediately replied, Jamie, what you don't understand is that the people are stupid and lazy and deserve to be led by people like us, right? And the point, and then later on, I was about to lose my stuff and really go for Alexander Nix and everything, and then it turns out Carol Cadwallader's got a microphone up her sleeve and here and all that, so great. So I just went out horrified. But what I can't really impart to you is how sure that guy was when he said it. So the point is, yeah, the people who are making these decisions about controlling the food of the future, the people who are making decisions about what we do with AI, there's a sort of disconnect. It's the point I was making earlier from Hazel's magazine. There's a total disconnect from the consequences of their actions and a total lack of care. And I don't know how that can be broken down. It can't be broken down, certainly can't be broken down in the streets, because, you know, there's a very powerful mechanism in place to sort of violently repress us, right? So it's going to have to be, literally, people standing up and being counted in their hundreds of thousands, globally, and actually, you know, making that sort of sacrifice of filling the prisons until the prisons are absolutely full. That's the only way you can have it is literally a mass movement, okay, where it actually becomes overpowered, because otherwise we're in a really serious predicament in the future as well. And it's important to name this, because this is a really positive, hopeful magazine. And Extinction Rebellion is really positive, hopeful development and change. But often people can underestimate what we're up against in a way, do you know what I mean? And that hasn't really showed its ugly head yet, anyway. Just quickly on the terms of the, well, I don't know if you can call it conspiracy theories, but basically, yeah, so what they called, the algorithms when stories come up, so if you look at Extinction Rebellion, they'll be below saying, Gail Bradbrook works for 5G or something, there's something to do with aliens as well, and I'm not putting it down, there's lots of them. But we did this great, I really recommend this essay from New Internationalist called The Politics of Paranoia. So one of our great, he's Big Bad World, Polyp, the cartoonist, and he really got into this stuff. And he basically joined a shed load of conspiracy theories, right? And all of them start with man didn't land on the moon, or Lady Diana was murdered, and all of them trickle down to the bottom, and they're going, the Jews are the problem in the world. And they are all being controlled by far-right extremists. And it's a really dark, murky world, you know? So Gail has had to put out, Gail Bradbrook is the one who's been targeted the most, so she's put out a film 2 weeks ago, so responding really clearly to all of these conspiracy theories. And they are just conspiracy theories, right? And it's debilitating, but it's par for the course. You know, you've got to realise these people we're talking about are trillionaires. It's nothing to chuck hundreds of thousands at some crazy media campaign and employ people to say all kinds of stuff, just like they bought scientists for so long. You can buy scientists, you know, there was a NASA scientist saying, yeah, you know, climate change is made up, you know, and then he was being paid a bloody fortune. So there's endless money, so it's just one of many tactics to kind of pull the rug from underneath your feet.
Any question of power?
Sorry, what's that video called?
I can't remember the name, but if you put in Gail Bradbrook 5G, you'll get all the conspiracy ones, but on Basecamp or it'll be on the Twitter feed. You could actually ask the Twitter feed to have it up again. Yeah.
There's also a great book called AI Superpowers by a guy called Koshy, who started Google in China and now runs the biggest venture capital tech fund in China. So it is a bit sort of like this scary and interesting.
Cheers, thank you.
So there's a question about regional power, devolving power, and the importance of it.
Yeah, I think it's quite important. Yeah, I just think, you know, as we've said lots of times now, people can make good decisions, particularly when they're aware of what the consequences are, for example, of not acting around climate change, for example. And if it was decentralised and if we had sort of local assemblies and ways of communicating so we can connect with each other, and if we do have voting and things, make sure it's, you know, proportional representation and that, you know, it's just properly done, that will make a massive difference. So yeah, totally for independence and, you know, localisation for sure.
And then should we end with that first question, which was about personal carbon footprint cutting? Hazel, do you know that?
Yeah, so we had a piece about this in the magazine. I would recommend someone called Mike Verner's Leap. he's done loads of really detailed carbon footprint studies, and I imagine as part of this there's a report called 1.5-degree lifestyles, and it's one of the first studies that has actually put our personal lifestyles, tracked it against the Paris targets, because they usually do it as countries or by sectors. This is the first time it's done actually by households, and they are supposed to be creating a tool that I've seen like a prototype of, but I don't know if they've brought it out yet, which allows you to like type in your use and it can kind of model and help you to set your own path to zero. And I think it's a really nice way of doing it because it goes a bit further, like you say, than I could just do a bit less of that or try not to fly so much. It actually will, you know, give you a set of targets and a timeline for getting there. So do contact them and harass them and ask them when their tool's coming out. But then in terms of actual answers to the question, he had like a list of 10 things, and then they would adjust your diet. I know that's something that George Monbiot says, stop eating lamb and meat and stop flying. He says the two biggest impact things you can have. And there are various things, you know, under each header: adjust your diet, decarbonise your travel, consume less and wisely, use the fridge and the library, cut home energy use, clean up investments, talk about it with other people, because in a way we can cut our own carbon, and if nobody knows about it and it's not encouraging others to do it, it's just not going to add up to the kind of level of change that we need. And then his other one is be kind to yourself. We're not perfect, we can only do our best. And the other one is to do all of them, and then the other one is, I think I messed it up. The other was to get involved in politics and try and be disruptive, because change won't happen by itself unless you challenge power, as you mentioned. And the final one is to do all those things. So that's his recommendation.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for turning out. This is such a great turnout. There's going to be tea and cakes, I believe, now for a bit. And I'll hand over to Peter. Got more information.
There's going to be tea and cakes, and Hazel's already saying this. There's some sign-up things at the back for Extinction Rebellion Frome, and also, I guess, for New Internationalist. And copies of the New Internationalist report that you can buy. And also, what's the other thing? Oh yeah, going back to that brief question, Annabelle was at the back, I can talk to you more about it. Runs an Extinction Cafe every Tuesday with others, which is an opportunity to share feelings and share where you're at. So that's happening in Frome every week, and I'm standing at that and tell you more about that. Anything else?
I just want to say thanks so much to the Rye Bakery for having us, particularly to Jane and Amy, thanks so much, and for the hospitality for here in Frome. And oh, right, sorry, there are evaluation forms which are on the back of it, where you can write thoughts about the evening and your thoughts about climate change, whether it will help change your opinion or not. Do give us feedback using the forms at the back. Thanks.